Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Vega Virtual Talks, our very first Vega Virtual Talks. Today's topic is innovation during pandemic. I'm going to do an introduction and thank you to each and every person that has joined the Vega Talks. We will also make the recording available on our website for people to view afterwards. My name is Pretorius. I'm the campus navigator at the IIE Vega School in Durban. I will be your facilitator for the day. Our structure of the talk will work as follows. We have two speakers that will present today on the topic of innovation. We will have 10 minutes per speaker, then open up for a Q&A session for the participants to raise questions, and then we'll close the session with a discussion of another 10 minutes. Okay, just going into the next slide. In the house today we have Greg Ardey. Greg Ardey is the editor and journalist of KZN Invest. He has a very keen interest in cities, economic and social development, business, entrepreneurship and education. I've provided the URL so that you can explore more on each of the participants that we have here today or the speakers. Greg is also our partner, a media partner, and what he does is he interprets these talks and then produces an article for his magazine, which you can also then, of course, view when the next edition goes out. Greg, thank you for joining us today as well. Then we also have our first speaker is going to be Ian Gourlay. Ian, welcome to the chat. Ian is the Group Creative Director at Barrows Global. Ian's focus is on group creative innovation and business development, and I've also provided the URL for you to be able to go have a look at what Barrows does. Ian, welcome in the house.
Thank you very much, Narieta. Hello, everyone.
And then I'm going to introduce Wendy. Wendy will be our following speaker. Wendy Mahoney is the Managing Director at New Mela Holdings. She's a thought leader in the development of innovative leaders and inclusive cultures, and I've also included her URL for you to go and have a look. Wendy, welcome in the house.
Thank you for having me, Narieta.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to move into introducing, Ian is going to take the first session. So Ian, you can now take over the presentation, and all the participants, remember you can now take notes, prepare your questions that you'd like to ask during the Q&A session. Ian, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Narieta, and again, to echo Narieta's words, welcome everyone to the first virtual chats with Vega. I think it's a fantastic idea. Well done, Narieta and the team, for setting this up, and I hope it's going to be one of many in the future. And thanks to everybody that's joined in for this, giving up your time this morning to listen. I think it's a way that we're going to communicate a lot more in the future, and I hope it benefits everyone, and your feedback's greatly, hugely appreciated, and will be responded to post the session. I'm going to be talking about, obviously, the broad topic of innovation during a pandemic, and I'm going to start off with my first slide, which is pretty much around what's your own incentive to innovate. And I think the incentive to innovate is something that drives us all. Sometimes the incentive's stronger than other times. It's just interesting that during the pandemic, the threat of imminent death or the closure of business has fueled innovation in a way that I haven't seen innovation happen before, and not just with us, but globally around the world. And my thought here was, why has it taken something this tragic and huge to actually spur in this level of innovation? And I think what we should be all asking ourselves is why weren't we innovating like this before? Why weren't we challenging and pushing ourselves like this before on a daily basis? I know the odds or the risks are much higher now, and the stakes are much higher, but the stakes of surviving in any business at any stage are always high, and to innovate on a daily basis and make innovation part of your business model on a daily basis is key to the survival of any business. And my key learning or a key hope of mine is that we all take out of this that we've been ratcheted up into another level of innovation, another surge of innovation that we haven't seen here before, and I think it is I hope will stay with us for a long time. innovation we've seen in our company. It's been remarkable seeing people drop barriers between departments, even between companies within the same group, and even across borders. Collaboration has become a key win in innovation, and I think it's all because of this incentive that brings us all together. In this instance, us fighting against the virus, but within our own businesses, we all have struggles on a daily basis against fighting against competitors, whomever they may be. And I think this level of innovation is key. And it's an interesting one for me is maybe challenge yourselves on what is your incentive to innovate in the business, articulate it clearly, and then you can charge at it and attack it. The second point I wanted to make was around the point around innovation equals hope. And this is the big one for me. Hope's one of my favorite words. And it rings true for me in a big way that when we innovate in a business, we all feel this sort of hope. Hope's almost like an elixir that gives us strength to press on, face our daily hardships, and dream of things to come. And when somebody comes up with an idea within a business, a new innovation, it certainly sends a ripple of hope through the businesses, what our future business model could look like. And in times like this, I think the sharing of fantastic innovations that are happening around the world certainly lifts us all up. So it sort of buoys us in getting excited about what other people are doing, inspires us to do something remarkable. And I think the underlying word over there is hope. It gives us hope that we stand a chance to do something here, and gives us hope to what we can become in the future as well. So I really think that innovation in a time of a pandemic should be inspired. We should be inspired by hope. We should be challenging ourselves. We're hoping for a better future. How can we build it? And what can we achieve with the innovation we are delivering in the businesses? But there's the sense of hope, and I feel it certainly within our business. I think as South Africans, we feel it a large degree as well when our president has addressed us on certain instances, and we've been impressed, I think very impressed with the way he's handling it, the authority, the clarity, and it gives us hope that there's an opportunity for the country to do the best we can against this if we stand together in that. So the next slide I wanted to talk a little bit about is around reimagine. And I don't know, for those of you that have been watching Governor Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, his daily briefings at 5 o'clock SA time on CNN are a remarkable visualization, or a remarkable way to show the hope and the clarity of leadership and the thought leadership that's coming across from that individual. And the other day he was asked, he put it to the audience listening. He said he's a little bit tired of people asking him what New York is going to look like when we go back to normal. And he said, like, let's just throw the word normal away. And I know that's become the new normal has become already a bit of a cliched term in the society that we're in now. We know there will never be a return back to normal. But he suggested rather, let's use the word reimagine New York in the future. And I've really picked up on that word, and I'm using it strongly across this and in my personal space as well. Reimagine everything. Reimagine the way we travel, reimagine the way we engage, reimagine the way we communicate, and reimagine what spaces are going to look like, what innovation is going to look like, what comms are going to look like. And the one point he made, which I'll reiterate again, which I really, really enjoyed, is that things post-disaster are always better for them. And by way of example, he spoke about ground zero. If you go to ground zero now in New York City, it looks much better than it looked before. It's a beautiful space, it's an emotional space, but it's better for what happened. If you look at air travel globally now, post 9/11, it's better, it's safer, it's more considered, and we've all benefited from what was a tragic event, but the situation is now better. Hurricane Susan, when it slammed into the east coast of the United States and it did all the damage it did on Long Island and other places, you go to those places now and they're better for them. And I think what we should be doing is reimagining the future for ourselves, in our own businesses, in our own society, in our own personal lives. And I would urge everyone to reimagine it being better than it is today. And we will make it better. I think as humans, we have a tendency to do that. We will do it, and we will make it better. And I hope, there's the word again, I hope we look back in time to the days when we innovated, we worked incredibly hard, and we reimagined our futures, and we sit in those futures looking back, and we're better for it. The next point I'd like to talk about as well is the principle of sustained innovation. No point having this surge of innovation motivated by this tragedy that's happening all around us, and then post the tragedy sort of waning off and going back to our old ways. I really think that what we should be doing, and I encourage this to everybody, is to be documenting and watching and capturing the things that are happening in and around you in the business and society, to try and work out new, almost neurological pathways here on how to innovate and how to come up with things. And I use neurological pathways in a metaphorical sense. I'm talking about processes and things that are happening that wouldn't have ordinarily happened in the past before. I'm seeing collaboration across businesses. I'm seeing collaboration across borders, races, cultures. It's absolutely fantastic. I hope these collaboration pathways develop new ways of thinking in our brains and ways of behaving in our societies and ourselves as individuals that stay with us in times to come. We must learn from this, and we must continue applying this learning as we go forward. And that is, in essence, the sustained innovation I'm talking about. We can learn from these tough times, but to learn and not to use, a good old Buddhist saying, to learn and not to use is not yet to know, and to know and not to use is not yet to know. And I think we must take heed of that, and I encourage again to document processes, meetings, structures, and things that are happening in the stage now, and bake them into your future plans. And that leads me to the last point I'd like to talk about around innovation and the pandemic, and quite a key point is that of responsibility. Now, I don't want to be perceived sitting here giving a talk that everything's sunshine and roses and I'm enthusiastic and buoyant about what's happening. I'm terrified and I'm overwhelmed, and I'm scared quite about what's going on a global basis. But I am enthused. I look for the silver lining on everything, and I'm encouraged to see what is happening and the spirit of humans and how we're collaborating and doing what we're doing. And I think at the moment, the rate of death and the tragedy that's happening around us is almost happening at an overwhelming speed. And we haven't yet had time to pause and grieve. It will come. I have no doubt it'll come. But my call out is to everybody. I think we owe it to those that are dying and those that will die over the next coming months, to ensure that they've not died in vain, to make sure that we've learned something from this as individuals, as businesses, as a society, and to make sure that we apply those learnings into that future that I spoke about, that future that's going to be filled with hope, that future that's going to be filled with sustained innovation, that future that's going to respawn our businesses, that's going to make the world a better place than what it was before. We all have the opportunity to show up in our workspaces, in our private lives, and make a difference. The clock is ticking, and the spotlights are on us. And I really believe that a company that doesn't take a strong stance in the future about where they stand on social, political issues and social issues particularly, and how they play a part in society, these companies will be very partially judged going forward. So this is a tipping point. It's a line in the sand, and I look forward to a future filled with hope, filled with a better place, and filled with something that we can all look back and say, we did that, and we are going to do this going forward. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you very much, Ian. That was wonderful. I'm just going to ask for you just to see, what do you see on the screen right now? Do you see sustained innovation?
I do.
Okay, perfect. No, that's fine. I'm just taking over the click function. Ian, thank you so very much for your talk. We're going to change the settings now to allow participants to, you can put up a hand if you would like to ask a question for Ian to respond to. So participants, if you would like to now ask a question, please click the little guy with the hand up. I will then see that you want to ask a question. You will then be able to unmute, and of course I will allow the first person to then ask a question. So if you've got any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, I see Adam. Adam, you've got your hand up. So Adam, if you don't mind, make sure you unmute, and then you can ask Ian your question now.
First off, thank you to the panel and to Vega for creating this wonderful initiative. educate us through these difficult times. Ian, thank you for taking the time to speak to us and engage with us. We're seeing a lot of, can everybody hear me first off?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
We're in unprecedented times, we're in uncharted waters. We're seeing a company like Discovery evolve as a company by doing online virtual sessions between doctors and patients. We've seen prior to COVID-19 that this was something that the governing body would not implement because it had no, there was jurisdiction and there was a limit to what could be done virtually. What are we seeing evolving virtually in these types of spaces, in the medical space, in education? What do you see for the foreseeable future that's going to be implemented in these difficult times? Thank you.
Narieta, can I respond to that?
Yes, please, Ian. And everybody else, please keep your mics on mute. Thanks, Ian.
So, Adam, thanks for the question, and I think I agree with you. Obviously, remarkably unprecedented times. It's unbelievable what's happening. But again, to look at the silver lining, I think what's happened. I've heard it a lot in businesses and trends that we're following around South Africa, around the world, as part of our business. That there's this common thread coming through that people's 5-year plans are becoming their year plans. So I think if you look at the industry of medicine or education or any industry for that matter, we all look down the 5-year path and think about 5G being part of our daily life. We all think about online being a massive part of our daily lives, but we all had it as our 3 to 5 year plan. COVID has come along and changed that remarkably. It's accelerated everybody's long-term plans into their short-term plans. We've seen that as a recurring theme around the world. A very interesting thing has come out of it as well, is that by and large, the people that are going to be benefiting from these online services, and I'll use education as the example that you brought up, only the younger generation. And what I find quite interesting is that they're not battling at all with making the transition to online learning. It's the educators and the institutions and the processes and structures within those institutions that are battling to make this warp speed jump across to doing everything virtually. So I think everybody's sort of been given a collective kick up the jacksie, so to speak, on how to change their businesses and remodel and restructure. And I think this is a good thing, because it's going to make us all come out of this with new skills, new processes that have been thrust on us. And sometimes, you've heard the term in industries before, people say to you, if you don't disrupt your own business, you will be disrupted. Well, we've been disrupted by a virus here, and it's disrupting every single one of our businesses. Thank God it's not a competitor disrupting us, it's a common enemy that's disrupting us, and we are all going to rise because of it. So I look forward to a future around education online. I look forward to all these things, and I look forward to an accelerated learning curve, accelerated processes of approving things, accelerated processes of applying things, and again, back to that hopeful, bright future.
Thank you, Ian. Adam, I'm going to take your hand down. Thank you for asking that question. We've got 2 more people that raised a hand. I'm going to allow those 2 questions to be asked, and then we're going to introduce Wendy as the speaker. Brahoni, you've got your hand up. You can now unmute and ask your question. Everybody else, stay on mute. Thank you.
Thank you, Narieta. So I just want to echo Adam's thanks. So a very brief question. In terms of innovation, obviously we all know innovation refers to thinking and new thinking processes. I find that a lot of talk out there is about the small business and how the small business is going to survive. And obviously you come from a big organization, Barrows, which is a global international organization. What is your take on the small business, Ian? Just out of interest, because I know already that quite a few small businesses have already folded, and then there were also quite a few people in the South African economy over the last year or 2 have been retrenched that were starting up small businesses. How do you see that? Just out of interest, because that makes the dynamic even a lot more difficult for the person that doesn't have the infrastructure behind them that a large business, say for instance, and just because you're the speaker, Barrows does. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. Great question. I think I think everybody's going through difficult times in their own special ways, and my heart goes out to the small businesses that have had to close and many businesses that are having to apply some very difficult or make some very difficult decisions. I think there's pros and cons of being a larger organization and being a smaller organization. Smaller organization generally allows you more agility and opportunity to respond to breaking crises or things that happen. And being a larger organization, generally they tend to be a little bit more cumbersome. Luckily, our particular business, we've sort of baked in the ability to pivot very quickly into the business, and I think that pivot it's certainly not lifted us completely out of a difficult future. No one can predict what that future is going to be. So, even though we're a large business, we do run our individual opcos as individual opcos by region and by country. So they're all struggling in their own sort of way, although we're still part of a group. And I think we do get a opportunity to sustain a certain amount of continuity, but it's not sustainable on a long-term basis. So we might be able to keep our staff and salary and etc. for a couple of months, but then, and this is happening across the WPP group, which we're part of as well, is senior execs are starting to make sacrifices. You're starting to make decisions within the business to start shoring up cash and capital. So I think large businesses come with their own headaches. Small businesses come with their own headaches. The benefit that a large business does have, and we are in this process as well, is that a large business very often supports small businesses, and obviously during government legislation that's actually mandated. So through us innovating and pivoting and coming up with several products that we have come up with to help protect shoppers and tellers from viral interaction, we're working on screens for ambulances and hospitals, and we're working on sanitizer foot pumps and all sorts of products that are helping slow the spread of the virus. But in turn, as we are keeping certain lines in our business going, we in turn are keeping smaller suppliers in business. So we use plastic suppliers, we're using molding suppliers, all sorts of other smaller businesses. So I think a large business has the responsibility and the opportunity to keep a lot of those smaller businesses up and going during these tough times, and face the challenges and headwinds they do. And at the same time, I think the smaller businesses, this is the opportunity to, how fast can you pivot? How fast can you make a move to respond to an opportunity that the crisis really does bring to us?
Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much, Ian, for that response. Based on the time availability, I'm going to give Stephanie the opportunity to ask her question. Stephanie, you can unmute your mic. I see there are two other people that put up a hand. I will just manage it based on time availability. So Stephanie, please ask your question. Okay, so Stephanie, yes, Stephanie, hi.
I'm sorry, it wasn't working.
No problem.
So it's more from a personal side. Ian, I was just wondering, during this time, personally and people at my work have been struggling to come up with innovative ways and creative thinking and just to stay motivated. Is there any practices in particular that you find help you during this time?
It's a great question, Stephanie. I tell you what, when we went into lockdown, there was a sort of, because we're a business that we stay so close to each other, for those of you that have been to very, very close proximity offices, open plan, and we interact and engage with ourselves a hell of a lot. There was this weird sort of vacuum in the first 3 or 4 days where we weren't seeing each other all the time, and we felt very disconnected. And it was a very unusual feeling. And what happened quite quickly within the business is I found a surge, this rise of people reconnecting and talking and sharing, and we've started these things called conversations in our business, and that are basically not innovation brainstorm sessions, which you generally have when you're in an advertising business, but more conversations, just more about what are you hearing, what are you seeing, what are you thinking, and those conversations spit out and generate fantastic ideas. So you almost need to set up a way of talking and engaging with yourselves as a small business, as a community, to stimulate yourselves to arrive at the innovation. Sitting down and looking at a blank page and saying, I need to come up with an idea. Well, what's your springboard looking like. You need a strong springboard. Now that goes past just you and your team. If you're a small business, you have 3 or 4 people, or you're an individual, you need to broaden your network of inspiration. So who are you looking at? What you're reading about? How are other companies responding to this? So you do have time now during this lockdown to read a lot more, to learn a lot more, and to refuel your innovation engines so that you can innovate. And that's what we've been doing in the business a hell of a lot, is looking around the world, stealing with pride on ideas that are transferable across great ideas, and sharing our ideas on open platforms, on many open platforms for other people to use. And then those people feeding back and inspiring us. And again, it goes back to that thing around innovation being hope, is that it's lifted us all up. And the more we talk and the more we engage and the more we share, the more inspired we get, and so the innovations flow. Stephanie?
Ian,
Great,
thank you, Stephanie, for asking the question as well, and Ian for responding. I feel highly motivated when I myself heard about opportunities of conversations being created. So what a wonderful initiative that we can actually borrow and implement. I've got 2 people that wanted to ask a question, Sepiso and Tando. I'm gonna allow you to keep your question on the shelf for now. We're going to move into Wendy's session. If you would like to still ask that question, you can do it during the closing Q&A session. Thank you, Ian. We're going to move into Wendy. Right, so it's session 2, Wendy Mahoney, Managing Director of New Mailer Holdings. Wendy, welcome to the discussion, and thank you for joining us today. And over to you.
Thank you for having me again. Okay, well, perfect introduction to have Ian speaking. So you can see on that slide there, this was written by Cotter in 2016, that the rate of change is only going to increase and dealing with change is becoming an increasingly important skill. So that was pre-COVID, and we've titled this industrial revolution the exponential age because things are getting exponentially faster, and then we throw in a black swan event like COVID-19, and all of a sudden we've accelerated speed even more. So the ability for us to thrive right now is linked to our ability to be able to adapt, which is a famous saying of Charles Darwin. So right now we've got, we're living in an age where inspiration is the forefront of innovation, and innovation is not a future aspiration, it's a current necessity. So it's no longer something that we're aspiring towards, it's something that we need right now. And those companies and those individuals that were innovative pre-COVID-19 have an advantage now at the moment because they're not stuck in a survival mode, they're stuck in a reimagine mode, which is what Ian was speaking about a little bit earlier. So if we go then into what actually is a definition of innovation. So a definition of innovation is that you are conceptualizing an idea into a product or service of value that is mutually viable. And you can see there, I've got scales, and on either scale I've got V, and there's an equal sign. So what you do as an individual or as a company is you are providing a product or service of value to your consumer. And so it's outside of yourself. So what you've got to do right now is focus on what is the value that I'm creating and what is the value that's actually demanded out there. And this is actually cross-contextual in that it relates to personal relationships as well as professional relationships. That every relationship, because values are our deepest subconscious drivers, every relationship, the health of it, the sustainability of it is linked to what value am I giving based on what the other party wants, and am I actually giving what the other party wants. So it's a great opportunity right now to step outside of ourselves and just to elaborate on that process of value creation. It's a 3-part process. So the first part is inspiration. So the inspiration phase is actually the phase that most companies or individuals overlook and don't actually place enough emphasis on. And the inspiration phase is actually the most complex phase, and that actually has 4 stages. And the 4 stages that go into inspiration are to connect with your stakeholder, your consumer, empathize with your consumer, then interpret what actually is the problem, and then define what the problem is. So most of us assume what the problem is, and we go straight into the ideation phase. instead of doing that connect and that empathize first and saying, what do our consumers need right now outside of myself? Your ideation phase has got 2 stages, and that's your explore and then refine, because now you're going, okay, so now that I actually understand what the problem is, how do I solve this problem? Then you go into your implementation phase, and that has got 2 stages. It's a prototype where you rapid prototype, you get it out to market as quick as you're able to. We no longer have the luxury of perfection, and perfection doesn't exist. So now we prototype and then we test it. We go back and we refine and we iterate. And it's a constant process. It's a fluid process. So even as Ian said, you know, we no longer have the luxury of these 3 or 5 year plans, though we still obviously need to have 3 or 5 year plans. We're now going into these 6-month plans. That's fluid. Right now, everything is online, but who knows what the future looks like? You know, maybe after being deprived of human contact, we're going to then have a resurgence of their demand or need for human contact in the future. So when you're constantly fluid, you're able to adapt to what are the needs of the marketplace, because you have that connection with your stakeholder. And every individual, I mean, we're all the same, we're all human beings. Every individual either wants to avoid a pain or they want to gain. So as long as you understand that human drive, that human need to have their values fulfilled, to avoid a pain, to get a gain, that's your starting point of inspiration right now when you're struggling with regards to how do I survive this pandemic. So if you walk into a technologically advanced company and you don't feel seen, heard, and feel that you matter, they're not an innovative company, they're simply a technologically advanced company. So a lot of people, we get confused with the social construct of innovation. We assume it's disruption, which is one part of innovation. We assume it's technology, though it's based on what the consumer needs, what the consumer's pains are, what are they trying to avoid, and what their gains are, and how do we help them with that process. And technology may or may not be a part of it. So again, right now, to emphasize, while everything is going online, that doesn't necessarily mean you're being innovative. It depends on what the consumer wants, and the product or service that your consumer wants right now may not be a technological product, and in the future then there might be a resurgence of human contact. So if your golden compass is the needs of your consumers, that'll always be your point of navigation, depending on whatever crisis comes now or in the future. So this is a beautiful definition of innovation that I love. It's empathy to connect, inspiration to solve, creativity beyond existing paradigms to ideate, and courage to implement. So these are very human-centric skills. So innovation is a very human-centric process, which we don't understand, again, because we confuse innovation with technology and with disruption, which is, again, is a small part of innovation. So it's a paradigm shift. It's a way of seeing the world that's deeply rooted in connection and empathy, because your golden point, your compass, is always the needs of your consumer, the needs of your stakeholder, and it's always outside of yourself. It's what do they actually value. So do you see me truly? How many, and right now, those companies that are being innovative, it's very interesting right now to see how companies are responding. And if you sit and you reflect and go, right, so when I'm seeing companies right now on social media platforms, do I feel they truly understand what I'm going through right now? Do they see me truly? Or are they merely trying to survive this pandemic or not? So those companies that are seeing us truly and we feel that they are understanding our situation, what we're going through, those are the companies that are going to receive our loyalty now in the future. So again, what you need to do is you need to stop and go, what lens am I seeing the world through? Am I seeing the world through my lens? Or am I seeing the world through the lens of my stakeholder? The key stakeholder, obviously, in a business is your consumer. Am I seeing the world through the consumer's lens right now? Am I empathizing? Am I connecting? Am I providing them a product service that they truly need right now? Do they feel that I truly actually care about them? So, and then the last thing, just to end off with, is that that's the purpose of innovation. So, I mean, managing innovation is a 3-part process: your strategy, your process, and then it's a culture. You know, does your culture support innovation? Do you have a process to monitor innovation, because you always receive what you monitor? And then do you have an innovation strategy in place? But it all starts with, what is your purpose for innovating? And your purpose for innovating is always outside of yourself. So this is a great opportunity for you to step outside of yourself and to again see the world through the lens of somebody else.
Wendy, thank you so very much. That was wonderful. I will now open again for questions and answers for the participants to join. I've got 2 participants that had their hands up when we had Ian's discussion. So Tsepiso and Tando, if you still want to ask a question, keep your hand up. But if you feel that you want to keep it for later, you can always just put your hand up again later. And I see I've got a 3rd participant that's now put up a hand. So I'm going to ask Tsepiso, would you still like to ask your question? If so, just click your mic button and you can talk.
Hello. Hi,
Yes.
everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep my question very brief. I'm working in an experiential agency, and obviously that's one of the most hit industries. And well, my question is how do we actually move forward, knowing that the whole thing of social distancing and whatnot, and obviously we cannot do our activations the same way. Because I mean, we can't really all go digital now, because the brands that we work with, mostly you'll find that they already have an agency that handles their digital platform and all that does their outdoors. So how do we actually move from this? Thank you.
Can I answer? Anyone? Yeah. Can I take that one? Seeing as though it's in the agency space, I'd really like to respond to that.
Yeah,
sure.
Again, I'm going to go back to that word reimagine. I'll tell you one thing that I'm certain about is that we are humans with human behaviors, and that will continue as we go forward, okay? We are being forced to change certain behaviors, but the baseline of those behaviors are not going to change radically. We are social animals. That's how we work. So what I would strongly encourage you to do is reimagine events. People will still want to get together. I mean, we're talking about, we also like to think about ourselves as being in the business of experiences and within retail. And I was chatting with the team the other day, and I was almost saying that, safety is the new experience. Well, it's certainly the new experience for the next couple of months. So do you start doing safety events that are sponsored by brands? Do you start acting out? And I really do believe we demonstrate physically the principles of social distancing, demonstrating physically the principles of hand washing. I laugh when I travel overseas into the Philippines and to markets in Asia. The demos, the in-store demos, the events in store are absolutely hysterical. They've got teams of dancers dancing, showing how to wash your hands as a dance. It's much more engaging. People watch that. And that happens in Brazil and a lot of markets as well. And I think I come back to our own events and activations in this country, and I think they're remarkably sterile by and large when you think of the entertainment value that I'm talking about in other markets. So I don't by any means think that your industry is dead in the water and nothing's going to happen from it. I do think that you need to totally reimagine the way these things could happen, because certainly in the short term, these brands, and we've seen so many brands stepping up, big brands stepping up to do their bit through whichever media or channel they possibly can. So you guys are a channel, and eventing is a channel. How does that channel do its bit? And you guys need to challenge yourself as a team to say, well, what can we do? We know how to, what do we have in our assets box? We can do this, we can do that. We have these skill sets, we have this in hand. How do we repurpose those to deal with the current situation at hand and at the same time reimagine a new future? That would be my advice to you.
Thanks, Ian. Wendy, would you like to latch on to that?
Yes, I'd love to. So again, just to reiterate that innovation is not episodic. It's a way of being. It's just all that's happened right now is we've had a black swan event which has changed the fluidity maybe from a slow river to now a rapid. That's the only difference that we're in right now. And again, I go back to the design thinking process, which starts with inspiration. So the question itself, you've got to ask, well, not ask that of your consumer, but connect with your consumer. So first look at, in the experiential space, who are your customers? Are you connecting with your customers? Do you understand what your customers are wanting right now? And before you then go into the ideation phase, first then evaluate that connection and that empathizing. Are you interpreting their needs? Are you defining their needs? And then go into, right, so how do I now serve the consumer now? Let that be your starting point.
Thanks, Wendy. I've got 2 more participants that would like to ask a question. I'm going to give Tando the opportunity.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay. How can we as the youth help in the collaborations and actively integrate ourselves in the solutions and the reimagining of the future? How do we get government and businesses to see, hear, and value us in terms of innovation?
I'm not clear on the question. Sorry, Tando, can you just reframe the question? How can you get institutions to understand the value of innovation?
How do we get businesses, institutions to value the innovations of the youth? How do we get ourselves integrated into the spaces of reimagining our future?
Ah, very good question. I had a conversation recently with the group operating officer for Aspen, who's also heading up the medicine stream now at the moment for COVID-19. And she said something very interesting, that there is actually now a greater value for millennials and Gen Zs in the marketplace in terms of collaboration, because what's happening is that the Gen Zs and millennials are thinking more outside of the box. They don't have the constraint, the reframe of your Gen Xers and your baby boomers. So now actually is a great time to get on board. Maybe even start reaching out to certain institutions and offering your services to collaborate, as thinking partners, because this generation does add a lot of value in terms of the richness of thinking that is going in. Because right now we're flying the plane while we're building the plane. So the richer our thinking, the richer our collaborative partners, the better able we are going to navigate that space. So I hope that answered your question.
Can I do?
Yes, Ian, please do add.
I also think that there are a lot of online collaboration platforms. I know IDEO, the design company, is certainly a design company that I place a lot of, I hugely respect and I follow. They've created some fantastic online collaboration platforms that you can join. They've incentivized, monetary incentive, $10,000 for best idea, and your idea can come from a research point of view, it can come from a physical idea, it can be simply a inspirational idea. And what's happening on that platform, which is really cool, is that you're starting to collaborate with people from all over the world. And to echo what Wendy said, is that I think there's a much, that generation is taking to this borderless collaboration and borderless digital collaboration very quickly, and it's quite exciting to see these ideas blossom and bloom on that space. I'm not saying IDEO is the only one. There are many collaboration platforms out there, and my urge and suggestion would be put your hand up, show up, rock up, and get involved in those things. And again, to echo what Wendy said, I've said this at a lot of talks at Vega and et cetera, and other design institutions and universities, is that your voice is being heard. It will be heard. It's been needed more than ever now. And I think more than ever, particularly in this COVID situation, I think more people are listening than ever before, which is a good thing. So that I think the timing is right now. People might have said this to you before, oh, your voice will be heard and your opinion is so important, with a little bit of like, well, maybe not. But now, more than ever, everyone is listening. The ball's in your court to show up, put your hand up and say, I'm going to do this, how can I do this? And start something, do it, just put yourself out there. That's my strong suggestion.
Yeah, start your own group.
Start your own group.
Yeah, literally put up your hand, get involved and be proactive. That's great. I'm going to ask Mark. He's got his hand up to ask a question. And then once we've answered Mark's question, we're going to move on to the next session. Mark, over to you.
Hi, Wendy and Ian. Thanks for the talk. I just have a general question to do with consumer behavior, and I'm wondering what changes in consumer behavior stick out to you as being more permanent after the pandemic, and so that should really guide sort of the areas which companies should be innovating in. I wonder if you have a comment, and then specifically to Ian, if you don't mind. Clients are obviously cutting back on budgets. Do you think that's a good idea, or what do you recommend to them to do?
So, Mark, I'll answer the clients one first and then get back to the consumer thing. I think a lot of clients, and we're seeing it ourselves as well, is that a lot of clients are doing, I think, the responsible thing. First up is they're shoring up their capital in own cash and making sure that they can look after their own first. There's been a rallying of will you donate to this, to donate to that, etc., etc. And a lot of big companies have put money into the Solidarity Fund, which has unfortunately dried up any other investment into other funds and causes around the world. But I'm consoled by the fact that they've either put money into the Solidarity Fund or they've put money into looking after their own house. So making sure that they can keep their own staff in salary, making sure that they can keep their business going within the legal ramifications the government has laid out, within the legal parameters, should I say, that the government's laid out. So I think clients cutting back on spend are doing it, for a responsible point of view. The other thing that I have seen is I've seen, there's an opportunity. You can either, go into a sort of a cower position, or you can go out there and be proactive about it. And we have seen certain clients taking the high ground on doing something that's, accelerating out of the corner, and they've grabbed their medias and they've pivoted quickly and they've started spending money. They've transferred money from this media spend to that media spend. So they've been agile enough to work out that certain channels are working better than other channels, and how do they direct their media spend to those particular channels and get maximum bang for their buck from that. So some agencies may feel a drop in spend, but other agencies may feel an increase in spend depending on the validity and the power of those particular channels. My strong suggestion, and I think it's the strong suggestion of any brand that's in crisis, is don't turn off your advertising spend. Just work out how to get more bucks for it and do it more bang for it and do it in the right place. Your question around consumer behavior, again, back to my 3 to 5, my 5-year plan becoming your 1-year plan, we are seeing obviously patterns that will be particular during the COVID crisis, and then we are doing predictive ideation around patterns that will be, how can I say, residual patterns that will stay with us for many times and become the norm in future consumer behaviors. So obviously there's been the sort of threat of online taking over physical retail and that sort of space, and there has been a surge in online retailing, but I think that surge needs to be kept in perspective. So everybody's saying it's doubled. Well, it's doubled from 0.1 to 0.2%, so it's in proportion, but certainly categories that should go off to online have made that transition a lot quicker. So pet food and diapers and sort of those sort of products are making their way onto online portals, and I don't think they'll come back. What we're seeing during COVID situations is shoppers are being very astute, or very clear and succinct with their shopping lists. They're not whimsical shopping lists. We've seen a decrease in impulse purchases. So people are watching their money very carefully now. So they're not making those random impulse purchases. They're walking into the store generally with the list. They're shopping off that list and they're coming back accordingly. They're also spending more time thinking before they go to the store about what we need, what we don't need, because the pop-in visits have just stopped. So you're not just popping in on your way from work. Going to the store now is a weekly outing, and it's a big deal. And the whole family creates the list, and we work out what we're going to do, and then someone goes and does the shop. And I think this savviness that's starting to happen with shoppers is going to be a big thing. And watching our money going forward is going to be a big thing. I'm hoping people are going to learn in their consumer behaviors to place value on the right things. I think there's going to be a big shift towards products that declare their background, where they come from, what they're made up of, all that sort of stuff. I think there's going to be a rise. We've already seen it, a rise in health, a rise in education, and I'm encouraged by shoppers coming out of this process and consumers coming out of this process as more wary, more savvy, more knowledgeable, and I think we'll be making better decisions in the future. Mark, that's my take.
Ian, thank you for responding to that. We're going to go into the final question and concluding thoughts. Before I move on, I'm going to give Greg also an opportunity to ask a question. But before I move on to Greg, Wendy, you mentioned your inspire, ideate, and then implement, and you particularly spoke about rapid prototyping within the implementation phase. Ian, I actually wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, to give an example of what you guys did when this crisis is hit. And you mentioned that you've got the conversation sessions, and I mean, Barrows is known for implementing and utilizing. You've got an innovation culture. It's what you do. You were faced with a situation to go, great, here's COVID, and you introduced a new product, if I can call it that, into the market, where it was about the COVID screens that you introduced. Can you latch onto that just from a rapid prototyping using the innovation process and how you actually made it happen. Ian, if you could respond to that. I don't know if you're on mute.
Sorry, I was Google error there.
Yeah.
Brianne or Kando mentioned the question about what does our business do going forward. Now, obviously, we sat down, a couple of days before the announcement of the lockdown was pretty sudden, and then we had sort of 3 or 4 days before the lockdown was implemented. And during those 3 or 4 days, looking down the barrel at closing up our design studios physically, and then absolutely closing up our production facilities here in South Africa, we asked ourselves, well, what are the assets we have at hand and what can we do? And priding ourselves on our ability to pivot and think quickly on what we could do. The design team sat down. It was actually a collaboration between design teams, sales teams, marketing, whole shooting match. And again, looked at the space that was our home space. We've always kind of retail was our home, and we wanted our innovation to do GPS right into that space. So everybody was talking about the frontline workers, the frontline workers, the frontline workers, and big respect goes out to them. I've got a candle burning here on the desk with my sister's picture on it. Working in the hospital in the United States daily, but there's another entire front line that's operational on a daily basis, which is the tellers in stores who've seen up to 150 shoppers a day, and the opportunity for transmission there is absolutely huge. So we visualized a screen to be put up between the teller and the shopper to protect both of them. We sketched it up on day one. By the end of day one, we had workings of a prototype. Day two, we went and put it into a store. We took some photographs. The end of day two, we circulated that amongst 3 retailers. Spar was the first one up. They jumped immediately, ordered 10,000. And by the end of day 3, we were in production. To date, we've produced close to 30,000 of these screens. The production line is still running. We're now doing screens for ambulances, hospitals, ICU wards, etc., etc. Those same screens are going into banking and everything. Basically, it's going to be the future that we're in. But again, it's that ability to look at what assets you have, look at the area that you can make the most difference. Use your network of clients that you have, share the idea, make a prototype quickly, as Wendy mentioned, and get it out there. Test it. We've also done a foot pump that we tested, and we put it out into the market. You'll start to see it arrive at a lot of stores in the next couple of days. And the first prototype was a little bit clunky, and the sanitizer dropped on your shoe. We reiterated. We made another prototype the next day, and now we're in production at 20,000 of those, with an international order of 10,000 for those as well. So it's exciting, and it's innovative, and it's all coming out of this crisis. But to Wendy's points, it's all about speed, and your iteration and your ability to pivot, and that's the little story that we've been doing and we continue to do.
Absolutely. It complements exactly what Wendy said about the process and the ability to do it quite rapidly, and also not to be too afraid that the prototype doesn't always have to be absolutely perfect. It's about getting it out, especially under the circumstances. I'm going to introduce Greg for a moment. Greg, so we're going to give you the opportunity for you to ask a question from your side. You can pitch it to Ian.
Thank you, Narieta. Thank you so much. I think the input of the participants has been fantastic, really uplifting all round, and thought-provoking. I'll start with a question for Ian, if I may. The words that leap out when you talk, Ian, are change at warp speed, the ability to pivot quickly, and all of this is framed by your constant, your refrain is hope. It's all framed in hope, and the hope that we will move to a better world. The one thing that strikes me is that business is, I mean, we haven't seen the half of it yet. It's really going to get nasty, for want of another word, possibly a better word, for ethics around business, and the need to be socially responsible, and the need to be transparent around processes and even pricing. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if any of that has bearing on your thoughts, but it strikes me that we're going to have to open up a lot more, and in doing so, become better businesses, better people. Thank you.
Wendy or Ian, who would like to take that one? Ian, if you are trying to speak, you're on mute.
Can't believe it. That's definitely a fun for me. So Greg, I think the way I finished up on my talk around responsibility, and I really do believe this, is that companies are going to be very, very heavily judged on how transparent they've been. People that are seen to be capitalizing out of the situation are going to really feel the full brunt of a social media backlash and the ultimate backlash, which is people just stop spending with you as a client. So as much as, I've had people say to us, oh, okay, so you're making all these products and you're doing all this thing, you guys must be printing money. Absolutely not. We've got one production line going out of many. It certainly doesn't cover our total billings as a business, and et cetera, and we're doing our bit, and our pricing is absolutely transparent with the clients on it, and it's not, we're not making massive money out of this at all. And I think that we've seen a couple of instances locally and globally where people have been caught out trying to capitalize on the situation, and shame on them. Don't know how else to put it. And I think there's going to be a lot of companies that try and do that. But again, that's going to differentiate the good from the great in the future. And I think right now we've always had companies touting what they do on a societal level, sort of towards the back end of their presentations as, oh, and we do this for society. I think that particular pitch is going to move right to the front end of their presentations and credentials. It's certainly one of the opening slides in our presentations when we talk about our businesses. We want to let you know what kind of business we are first, what we believe in, what are we doing in society as a whole, and then we'll get on to what we actually can do for you. Because I think people want to do business with people they feel a relationship with, and they want to do businesses with businesses they feel a relationship with. So being able to articulate what you do as a business and what you stand for, and be transparent about what you're doing and how much money you're making on this entire thing is going to be critical to the survival of businesses going forward, Greg. That's my take on it.
Very well. Sorry to chip in. Yeah, Wendy, I beg your pardon. It's like you spoke about the integrity of supply chains, or I don't know if you used that language exactly, but where you source your products and your entire supply chain. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond to that?
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to reiterate, Mark's question earlier in terms of where we're seeing trends right now. The biggest trend that we've noted, and I mean that's been reiterated in our conversation today, specifically by Ian, is the whole social space. So if you look at anything to do with wellness, safety, humanity, empathy, that's where you're seeing the biggest market expansion right now at the moment. And then obviously once the situation settles, the secondary is going to be environmental. So if you look at like the IDO program, and Upworks are also running a program at the moment where they are soliciting ideas from your millennials, from your Gen Z at the moment, but those ideas are all linked to how can we solve the social problems right now? How can we solve, the environmental problems? But again, the number one is that social. So it goes back to, in terms of your consumers, every human has an ability, has a desire to avoid a pain and want to gain. So in terms of avoiding a pain and getting a gain, observe stakeholders, observe your consumers, ask them, understand, interpret, see what the social needs are right now and how we can provide them.
Thanks, Andy. I'm going to ask Ian to take further on the question that Greg also asked.
So, Greg, I think what you were asking about is does that transparency extend into our supply chains and into people that we partner with? Absolutely. Often quotes around you can judge people by the company they keep. It's the same in business. I think you've got to do due diligence in making sure that the partners and suppliers that you're working with play by your rules, or play by not your rules, should I say, but more by your values and what you place importance on and how you prefer to show up in society. And I think those sort of choices about who you do business with will even float more and above in the future around pricing decisions. I don't mind working with a supplier that's marginally more expensive than another supplier if they share the same value set and they are doing good in society. I think that metric is going to float above the metric of mere price, which is obviously an important factor, but not the deal breaker going forward. So I would rather understand more about our companies, more about what they're doing more about our suppliers, more what they're doing for society, society, what they're doing within the greater networks, and make a decision on working with them based on that and then price. Greg?
Thank you,
Yeah,
Ian.
thank you. And thank you to Wendy too. Sorry to interrupt you, Narita.
No problem. Thanks, Greg, for also posing that question. As the final round, if there are any participants that would like to ask one more question, I'll allow for the floor to be opened now. I will allow one question just based on the time that we have available. So if there's any person on the talk that would now like to ask a question, okay, and Lungiswa is the first to put up a hand. Lungiswa, you can now unmute and ask your question.
Thanks, narrator. Thank you to our speakers. It's really been informative listening to everyone's contribution. My question, and this can really be answered by anyone, in terms of innovation, and particularly to the point that Wendy raised around the importance of having the empathy to connect, how do you see big brands innovating in a way that speaks to social impact, especially in a country with a great inequality, particularly mindful of how this pandemic is affecting informal traders and brands that are a big part of that market.
Wendy, would you like to take that one?
I'm not clear on what specifically the question is in relation to social impact. Are you asking how should companies be responding to social impact right now?
Yes, so in terms of innovation and a lot of businesses obviously shifting towards online spaces, etc. My take is that there's a big section of our population that is kind of left behind. So how do we begin to think differently about the way forward, specifically for the informal and township-based economy, brands that are in that space?
Well, how we should approach, yes, sorry.
I'll jump on the back of your response.
Well, it goes back to, you know, one thing I've had the pleasure of working a little bit with Ian and being able to spend time with Barrows. And one of the things that Barrows holds very strong is they live their values, and they live the values uphold their purpose. So during these times right now, you've got to critically evaluate a company's values and see, you know, in terms of their values, how are they living out you know, caretaking for all stakeholders, which incorporates obviously your rural communities. How are they serving those markets? Again, the time right now is challenging for a lot of companies because they are trying to keep the ship afloat. So I think it goes back to what is the intent behind the company, and why are they being vulnerable? Are they being transparent? You know, while they're trying to keep their own ship afloat, but how then are they serving the communities within which they operate? I'm not sure specifically on the question in terms of how do they go into the rural markets. So maybe if you could reframe it, or Ian, maybe if you understood it from a different perspective.
I'll take my perspective on it, Ngiswa, if you don't mind. I think, I'm just talking from a Barrows point of view, but I think there are many companies that we work with, clients of ours, that the informal markets and what's happening in that space is a huge, it's always been a future play, a massive future play for a lot of these companies. They've been struggling, I'll be straight up and honest, they've been struggling about doing something unusual and remarkable in the ability to deliver their products into these markets. And let's just dwell around food products right now, because I think those are the products that are the most important, with all the hunger riots and the anxiety that's going on around how are people going to eat right now, let alone worry about the virus. Mm-hmm. And I think the space that you're talking about, informal traders and how they're operating, it's a classic example of being reimagined right now. So the sort of network of how food certainly flows from your massive manufacturers, your Unilevers and your RCLs of the world, through to the wholesalers, the independent wholesalers, and then cascading from the independent wholesalers down to the traders and ultimately into the shoppers. It's a process that is ripe to be reimagined. There's a lot of food trucks being hijacked at the moment. settlement right now. And the sad thing is that it's those consumers living in the informal settlements that are bearing the brunt of those crimes that are going on right now. So we've seen responses where companies are repurposing. It's a word that we use in our business quite a lot, this principle of repurposing business and excess business inventory. So there's a lot of, I'll give you an example of excess business inventory, and that would be a fleet of trucks, for instance, right now that's all locked up, being unused because they can't go out there at the moment. Why can't we reuse those trucks to bolster food supply chains into informal settlements right now, or to run security and to get the food there a little bit more? There's a lot of innovation going on around people starting to put containers. We've seen this in the Somali culture, in the Somalian community in informal townships. They've started putting containers in the townships as almost sort of mini depots, and then that container services people within sort of 100 meters of that particular container. And there's this very interesting dynamic that happens in the informal settlements where the community looks after that container. So it's their food supply chain for the month. They make sure security is tight on that particular thing, and the food from that container services 3 or 4 spaza stores within walking distance of their front door. So you get these sort of micro systems that start popping up to deal with the situation going forward. And my strong suggestion is that companies like ourselves and our key clients, we've got to fall further and faster into these spaces to understand how fast these dynamics are moving and how can we help and get involved in those things. It's a huge opportunity, and I think the first movers in this space will reap benefits for many years to come on this, Lisa.
That's a great
Great,
response.
thanks,
Thank
Ian.
you. That's it, peeps. Thank you so very much. We have reached the end of our time frame for Vega Talks. I'm going to provide just a few concluding thoughts that emerged from the discussion today. And I think a few things that stood out for me was the key word that I got from today is reimagine. That's the very opportunity that a challenge like what we are experiencing right now with a global pandemic is that it actually gives us the opportunity to start reimagining the possibilities. I really enjoyed the point of creating conversations or opportunities for conversations where it's the very beginning of inspiration. We're also sitting in a situation where it's about rapid but also considered innovation that needs to happen. If we stick to the very principles of, if I can call it genuine innovation, is that it needs to be human-centric. Wendy also pointed out that, if you live your values as a brand, as an organization, we need to do so more than ever. And I think if that compass and that DNA is strong, brands do what is good at the end. And then it's an opportunity to show up. This is the very point where we as a society, as brands and as people can put up a hand and say we need to do our best and that it can actually produce for the better. I would like to say a special thank you to Greg, to Ian and to Wendy for participating today, and of course for everybody that dialed in. Thank you very much for Vega Virtual Talks.
Thank you, Narita.
Okay, thanks everybody. We will now stop the recording and have a good day.